Hi, my name's Joel, and this video is about a theory that's had a huge impact on my coaching. It's called adult development theory. It's a bit of a boring name, but the theory's anything but that. And if you're a coach, then I think you need to know about this because it contains a lot of the puzzle pieces of how human beings see the world, how they change, and when you learn about it, the way that you coach begins to change. So, psychologists have uncovered these fundamental stages of consciousness that we can go through throughout our lives. And the way that you see the world is very different at each stage. So, the way that you should be coaching someone is very different at each stage. And I think that coaches often miss that. So, a coaching intervention that works and is appropriate at one stage may not work and may be even inappropriate at another stage. When I learned to coach in this way, it was very powerful. I could really meet my clients where they were at. They could feel really seen. But I could also help them uncover the assumptions and beliefs, the hidden assumptions and beliefs that it had brought them where they were in their lives. You know, it brought them a level of success, but now it had become the very thing that was stopping them from growing further and from having more success. So that was powerful. I'm going to be speaking with Jennifer Garvey Berger in this video, and she's awesome. She's one of the world's foremost minds on how do you practically apply this theory in coaching. And it's something that I struggled with for a long time. And she's going to share with us how does she coach developmentally? How does she do it? How is it different from other kinds of coaching? What is it she's looking for when she's sat opposite her clients and she's in conversation? What is it she's listening for? What are the kinds of questions that she asks and the kind of practices that she gives? So it's packed full of content. We start slowly and then it builds and builds and builds, and there's a lot of really practical things that you can begin to play with in your coaching straight away. So you'll see at the bottom of this page, below this video, there's a comments section. I would love it if you would leave some thoughts in there. So leave some comments like, how did this video touch you? What did it bring up for you when you watched it? And let's get a dialogue going. Let's get a really rich dialogue going. And it's not the last in the series. We've got more videos coming up, so please keep an eye out for them with some really cool people. I hope you enjoy this, and see you again.
I guess I want to start by asking you, well, what is adult development, and why is it important for coaches? But let's start with what is adult development?
Adult development is a series of theories about how we grow over time. Like for many years, people focused on children's development, and we kind of had a sense about how kids grew and how a kid who was 5 did things differently than a kid who was 5 months, who did things differently than a kid who was 15. But we didn't have those same distinctions about grown-ups. We sort of felt like once you were your full height, you're kind of done. But with the beginnings of some research in the sort of 60s and 70s, people started to really look at what the differences are in the way grown-ups make sense of the world. And it turns out they're almost as big as the differences between 5 and 15-year-olds. And so understanding that and knowing about that is pivotal for all of us who work with grown-ups or who are grown-ups, I think.
Excellent. And I guess it's quite a hopeful start to our conversation, notice that we don't kind of plateau, once we get to adulthood, but actually that we can continue growing and evolving in the ways that are appropriate for us, but also that's not guaranteed, right? It's not guaranteed
Right.
We'll keep growing.
Right. I think it is one of the most hopeful theories I know, actually. I think that's a great word for it because it says wherever you are now, if you feel overwhelmed or like the world is just too tricky to understand, or your own sense making is bringing you pain, like there's another possibility, and we can grow into that. And that's why coaches knowing about adult development is so important because we can help be the ones who support our clients into new possibilities. And we can do that really intentionally if we understand the terrain we're walking. Coaches, I think, have a great intuitive sense of many of these things, but the finer distinctions just make us able to work more intentionally and more thoughtfully with our clients.
Mm. Well, let's talk about, I'd love to kind of start from a macro view and then kind of go in more detail. So I know you're influenced by a lot by Robert Keegan's work, and he's going to be also on the program this year, which I'm excited about. And so maybe you could talk about some of the, his model, but also some of the broader trends of adult development. What are some of these trends as we move through the stages, and then we'll get a bit more detailed later.
Sure. And I'm also influenced by Suzanne Cook-Reuter's work, and I know she's coming too. So it's like a super collection of people you've gathered. So basically the flow is when we are younger, earlier in our lives, we make sense of the world in a way that it is particularly concrete, right? Like what we can touch or feel or see, that's our world. And we don't have a good sense of what our minds are doing. Like, what's the connection between my mind and your mind? And so earlier in our lives, mostly when we're kids, but this happens for some grownups too, our minds are totally separate and we can't even guess what's going on in the mind of somebody else. And so the thing that we can deal with is our needs and how to get what we want, and kind of optimizing for us because we're so separate from other people. Then, and that's like either the last stage of adulthood or the first stage of the last stage of childhood or the first stage of adulthood, depending on kind of how you look at the model. And I call that the self-sovereign form of mind, right? Where like I'm the king because I actually have just a kingdom of one, because I can't even connect to your mind. Then something happens and we begin to realize over time, most of us, that this separation that we have both isn't true and isn't helpful, right? That there are ways we can clump together in groups, open up those walls, and in fact, put our faith in something outside ourselves. And we talk about that as the socialized mind, right? That's when we kind of pull our sense of self-esteem and what's right and what's true and what's successful outside of us. We realize, oh, we can't keep it in here. There are experts. There are people who know way more. We should give it to them. And so then in this socialized space, we become really in with a social surround, right? We become connected to a group. We feel for the first time loyalty to a group that's outside us. We're willing to, for the first time, really subordinate our interests in sort of doing what's best for the group, which earlier seemed like just a stupid thing to do, right? Like earlier, why would I take less money as an employee so that there would be fewer layoffs? Like that just doesn't even make any sense. Whereas later in the socialized space, you say, oh, we're all together. I'll give up a little bit for the good of the collective. And it's the good of the collective that I have my arms around at that point. And so it's a massive achievement in many ways. And it's still a little bit too small for the modern world, particularly leaders in the modern world, because you're constantly looking outside you for guidance, right? Like you give up an internal guidance system. And so very often now, and I think probably more and more often in this world where so many things are coming at you and where you can't put all your trust in one particular place, very often now people begin this transition towards what I think of as the major transition of adulthood, which is to self-authorship, to where we say, okay, I can't be written by others anymore. I have to pick up the pen and write that myself. And I need to make those decisions. And my surround still really matters. Loyalty still really matters, but I need to interpret it my way. And I need to make the decisions I need to make on behalf of myself and others collectively. So that's kind of the major arc. Then there are some folks who go even beyond that stage of self-authorship. It's much less common. But there are some folks who finally they decide, you know what? I don't think I really am the author of things. Like, actually, I think I'm kind of more a co-author because it turns out that my surround actually does have quite a role in shaping me, just as I have a role in shaping the surround. And it's kind of not true that I'm writing my own story. I'm kind of writing and written at the same time. And in this place we talk about as the self-transforming space, people kind of give up their sense of I'm the author and I'm in charge and I'm marching my way through at my pace and this is about me, to, oh, wait, this is about us after all. But it's a different kind of us. It's an us that's got the strength of self-authorship with an openness to the collective surround and the sense of co-creation.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like each stage becomes more spacious or more complex in some ways, psychologically complex.
That's right. Each stage becomes more psychologically complex, more able to handle the complexity of the world, and many moving parts coming at you. And each stage gets a little grayer, right? So earlier it's very black and white, then it gets a little bit like black, white, and gray, and then you get more grays, and then finally you understand in the self-transforming space that that black and white are only possible in connection with each other, that black and white create each other, and in so doing, they create gray. And so it's that interconnection that you begin to see more carefully.
I guess the question I have now is like, what is it that catalyzes our development? And I imagine it could be a big question. You know, in one sense, a lot of coaches are listening, and you know, I know coaches can play that role, but I imagine just living is playing that role. What kind of what are the ingredients that can catalyze that?
I mean, that's the crazy thing, right? Because earlier in our lives, our development is such that we have to grow, right? Like you don't have to ask what catalyzes a baby to learn to walk, right? That just seems to happen. But later in our lives, we get stuck. And so we all know people who have been faced with hardship and really grown, and faced with hardship and really ossified, or faced with great opportunity and grown to meet it, or faced with great opportunity and crashed and burned. So we have some ideas about what makes it possible for people to grow, and we certainly don't know the whole story. Some ideas, one of the great contributions of Bob Kegan's theory is this idea of the subject-object move, right? That during much of our life, we are, and we need to be, so fused with things that we can't see them and we can't separate from them. Like, we might be fused with our image of success as being a senior vice president by 40. And like, if it doesn't say senior vice president on my card by 40, I'm not a success. We can't really see that and operate on it. We're subject to that belief. It just occurs to us as true. And then over time, we can begin to separate that stuff out and say, oh, there's success and there's being a senior vice president by 40. They're not exactly the same. There's some space in between there. And as we are able to look at that, we're able to make sense of new choices. And it's that move in the micro that creates developmental spaces in every coaching session. And it's that move in the macro, like when we see how embedded we are in a social surround when we're socialized, and we begin to look at our embeddedness and make different choices, that whole thing creates a new self-authored form of mind.
So I guess if I'm fused with that belief and it's subject to me, then it's just running the show. I just don't know it's there really. It's just a truth about the world, and it's running me, and then at some point, I may, begin to question that, and then see how true is it for me, and it may, it opens up, something opens up. There's more choice and spaciousness.
Keegan talks about beliefs we have versus beliefs that have us, right? And when a belief has us, like there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go. And when you have a belief, then you can turn it over, you can put it on the table, walk around it, get a different view, and you might end up holding it, but you end up holding it instead of having it hold you. And the difference in your capacity for choice is just massive there.
Mm. So let's talk about that a little bit more, because I'm curious how you may begin to coach developmentally as opposed to another kind of coaching. What kind of things is a developmental coach looking for or asking? And also, like, how do we begin to question into where our clients may be developmentally? And I know that comes with a big kind of caveat of making premature judgments and putting labels on people. So let's kind of zoom in, and maybe that's a very big question I've asked you, or several questions in one, but
it's a very big question. Let's see if I can take them one at a time. So there's this first question about what's the difference between developmental coaching and other kinds of coaching. And I think for me, the difference is many forms of coaching are there to help our clients cope with their challenges in a new way, right? Like that's what coaching is, right? We're here to help our clients cope with their challenges in a new way. And the thing that makes developmental coaching developmental is we believe that, in fact, there's something about the way the client is making sense of the world right now that's getting in the way. And if they were to make sense of the world in a different way, new possibilities would arise for them, and therefore they would operate in the world in a different way. So I'll give you an example. I was coaching a chief executive once, and he said, "So Jennifer, the thing I want is for you to help me. I get really annoyed in my meetings because the people, my senior team's really, really good, but they can be kind of slow, and I'm just faster than they are, and so they want to talk things through when like the obvious way is there. And I know I get annoyed, and I'm like a book, and my impatience shows on my face. And so I want you to give me techniques so that they won't see how irritated and sometimes angry I am." And I said, "Cool, that's, that's a good, I'm delighted that you'd like your team to receive you as less angry and annoyed with them. That's awesome. But that's not what I do. What I do is I help you see your team differently by you being different. I help you see your team differently so that the anger doesn't arise, so that you won't feel angry or annoyed with them, because you'll be different inside you and a different set of things will come up for you." And so that's what we worked at. How do you see the world differently so that that feeling doesn't arise?
Excellent. I'm just thinking of a question that you posed to me one time when we spoke, which was how might I be wrong as well in these situations? And not that you would pose that to him directly, but what a powerful question for a CEO like that, who's putting it on his team and not looking at himself.
That's exactly right. Well, that is, in fact, a key piece of what we looked at, right? Like, how do you awaken curiosity? How do you get out of the belief that because I believe it, then it must be right? How do you loosen up on that operating system that says, I know the way and the truth and the light? And so if my job as a leader is to get you on board, which is sometimes annoying and tedious because you guys have to go through your little process. So how do you loosen that system up? And it's the loosening of that system, helping him see pieces of himself and his own sense making that get in the way. That's developmental coaching.
Yeah. Well, so tell me a bit more how you begin to coach people developmentally. You've talked about that, but like what kinds of things are you looking for in the people that you're coaching?
So the thing I'm looking for is the way they're the way they seem to be making sense of the world, like not what the challenges are, but why they feel like challenges to this person. So anybody can be challenged. Any senior leader can be challenged by conflict on her leadership team, right? Like anybody could be challenged by that. But what's the challenge for this particular senior leader? Is it because she gets so torn and she can't figure out what to do because she needs a clear steer from her surround because she's in this kind of socialized form of mind? Is that the problem? Is it because she's kind of in this self-authored form, but she has a sense that the conflict on her team is kind of wasting time, and like they just need to settle down and get alignment, and then we can go forward, and that's the problem. So I try to find out not what the issue is, but why it matters to this person. And by doing that, I try to kind of figure out, how are you making sense of the world? Like I often do that with questions like, what's the hardest thing for you about this? Or what's the most important thing? To not do the coaching thing, which expands possibilities, but to really do a kind of a core sample thing that goes deep into a single place. And then I hear them in a particular way where I'm constantly listening for what do they seem to have as an object of their reflection and what do they seem to be subject to.
So when you're going in deeper like that and asking them, what's the worst thing or the best thing, why is that important?
It's important because we don't lead with our sense making, right? Like I don't say to you, hey, Joel, let me tell you how I'm making sense of this situation and why it's so hard for me. And these are the parts I can't see. And these are the parts I can see. And let's have a conversation like that. Like, we don't know how to do that. We just say, I'm so pissed off because of what just happened in that meeting, right? Like, so we have to get under and under and under and under people's reactions, under their judgments, under their emotions, under their fears and anxieties for the future. And we have to get like into that place that they mostly don't go of, okay, why does this matter to me? And in what way does it matter to me? And what does that mattering show about how I see the whole world, how I make sense of the whole world?
So you maybe, I think I heard you talk about this point, but you might even ask the same question more than once to kind of drill down to get to that place that you're talking about now.
That's exactly right. I was talking with a client yesterday, and she was, we were dealing with a classic issue I think many of our clients have, which is that the world keeps giving her signals that she's awesome, but she doesn't kind of feel awesome. She doesn't feel worthy of what the world is giving to her. And so I asked her a few times, so what's the hardest thing about that? What's the hardest thing about that? What's the hardest thing about that? Just going a little bit deeper. And we found there, sort of at the core, a story that she was carrying that just is like in the root system of her whole sense making, and that she was totally subject to. And she had that moment, you just described it. She was like, oh my God, this is everywhere. It's everywhere. Like, I can't tell you, thousands of examples are coming up for me about how this is everywhere. And on the one hand, this is so powerful. And on the other hand, I can't believe I haven't seen this before because it's everywhere. But that's what being subject to something is, right? It's everywhere and we don't see it by definition.
Nice. I've also heard you talk about equals before, and I think it's related to this fusion kind of, but maybe you could speak about that a little bit as well.
Well, it's that whole idea that when things are, one of the things we can listen for as coaches is how things are tightly held together, right? When our clients basically say this thing and this thing are the same. Earlier I said like vice president and success are the same, but it can be just about anything. It can be, traveling the world, or it can be about your image of success. It can be about your image of truth or goodness, or or what's right about the world. When you have those things really tightly fused, somebody who can just notice, oh, it sounds like this equals that, gives you just that little bit of space to say, oh yeah, you mean that's not necessarily true. So I might still hold it as true, but now that I know that it's not necessarily true, like a good leader is honest, down to the most nitty-gritty detail. So no matter what the effect on somebody else is, a good leader is going to just say what comes into his mind as the truth right now. I have a leader I work with who thinks that, because anything else would be dishonest. Okay, well, let's just look at that, because not all leaders have to share every little blip that goes on in their head that's a judgment about somebody else in every single moment and still think of themselves as honest people. Is it possible that you could use some discretion about when and where to give people feedback that might increase the happiness and success of your team? I mean, that's like a new idea, and it opens up, oh, I wouldn't be a bad person. It wouldn't be necessarily dishonest if I didn't tell you, boy, that thing you said in that meeting was a load of crap, which is a lot like the feedback this person was offering.
There's a lot of people in the world who are maybe at socialized mind or moving from socialized to self-authoring. And what kind of things would a coach ask someone, who's maybe really guided by the authorities around them, the society they're in, to kind of find their own voice?
I mean, one of the cool things adult development offers is a map for our clients to look at too, right? So I was working with a really senior leader, and I had this sense that he was, that a whole lot of the kind of churn around him was because he was so invested in making other people like him, right? And so I started to try to figure out, is that because he wants people to like him, and why is that for? And as I asked him questions, it was clear that he didn't know how to like himself that well if other people didn't like him, right? So then you can see that that's a kind of outside in look at yourself, right? Like my self-esteem lives on you. And so I have to make you feel good about me for me to feel good about me. And so I said, hey, can I get a little theoretical with you right now? And talk to you a little bit about what I think I'm noticing and just check it out with you. And I did a little description of adult development. And he said, oh my God, that is exactly what I'm doing. And in fact, I've been doing this for like 20 years, and it's been really successful. But in this position, in this company, it's not successful because there are like too many voices and it's too hard. It's not working for me anymore. What do I do? And so we became a piece of our coaching now is very explicitly about moving from the socialized to the self-authored space. So he reflects on the difference between somebody's opinion of him and his opinion of himself, right? Like now we talk about that. When he loses his way, we get him centered into his purpose and his values, and like the system he's trying to create, the authorship system he's trying to create. We deal with the very real fears. That one of the things that keeps us in an earlier sense-making system, even when the environment is asking for us to be bigger, is what we'd have to give up, right? And so he fears that he'd have to give up being an empathetic, kind, loving, connected person, which is what very many people fear. They'll give up. They think they'll be kind of disloyal and arrogant. And if I push my way and I don't hold your way, Like that would be terrible. And so to know that you can be empathetic and kind and connected at all different places in the developmental trajectory has been a really important thing for us to explore together and for him to kind of go out and see in himself in his growing self-authored space. And then we practice. We have bodily practices where he can feel like when's his energy kind of resting in somebody else and when is it more kind of in himself. And bit by bit, he experiences himself as really transforming.
Because at that stage, is it right that can be looking for the right answer in some way? Yeah.
We're looking for the right answer. We're looking for we're looking for other people to make us right, as opposed to being able to navigate across many different perspectives and hold that balance. We can senior leaders can very often just seem to agree with whoever they're with. So you'll hear people say of a senior leader, yeah, it just depends on who we talk to last, how he feels about that issue. And sometimes that's a sign of this socialized sense making. Like when I'm with you, I think, oh yeah, that sounds really good. And and I want to keep our connection. So I say, oh yeah, that sounds really good. And I'm right there with you. So you think I agree with you. And then I come out of the next meeting, I say, oh, Joel had these really good ideas. I hadn't thought about them before. I think I'm with him. And they say, oh, no, it's like this. And he says, oh, I want to keep connected with you too. I really agree with you. And so in this particular case with this leader, people were like, it just depends on who we talked to last, how he's going to feel about that. And he's spinning the organization around by flip-flopping because he can't hold his own center. One of the most powerful reasons I think coaches should understand developmental theory is because we tend to coach people for the developmental transition we're in as coaches, instead of coaching them for the developmental transition they're in, if we don't have a set of distinctions about it, right? So like we are the coach, Bob Keegan calls it being good company for the wrong journey, right? Like we are awesome company for somebody like us and less good company for somebody like them. So I've had coaches who are super self-authored, who are coaching people who are more socialized, and they're like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, just take a stand. I mean, and they don't say that. Of course, we would never say it to our clients, but they think it. And they're like, well, just go work on your purpose statement some more or whatever. And basically they're saying, be different in the world, and then we'll be able to start our coaching. And that'll work for some clients and it won't work for all clients.
Well, we've covered a lot of territory, and I do want to give a little bit of space for you just to share a little bit on you're going to be teaching in the upcoming program, and imagine we'll be going into a lot of these topics in more detail, but what kind of things are people going to be getting from attending your sessions?
I mean, I think that I'm hoping that people get kind of three things, right? One is a set of powerful ideas. The second thing and let me just say, I think adult development is one of the most powerful ideas I know. It's the story of our lives. It shapes the way we make sense of the world shapes everything we do. So it's like not a small idea. The second thing is a set of practices. Like, so what do we do? Which we can go into in much more depth in those pieces. Like what's a move? What's a little move we can make as coaches before we understand the whole adult development thing? What can we start to practice with and play with that's going to take our practice to the next level? And I guess the third thing is that it's not just about our clients, right? It's about us. It's about who we are. And I'm hoping that people will get insight into themselves and into their own sense making and the way they see the world, and how they could be growing and changing if they choose to be growing and changing right now. So who we are really matters, and how we make sense of the world really shapes what's possible for our clients. And I think there has never been a time when our clients have needed us more. And I think there's never been a time when the world has needed us more to be centered, open, complex supports to a world struggling with simplistic and locked down leaders.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I can, I want to high five you on that one. I think it's, yeah, I mean, there's so much going on in the world today, and it is evoking something inside of me. And I see similar things with a lot of my friends and my coaching community that I know. And um, hopefully that's our response. You know, we can respond to what's happening. And just to say also, that's one of the things we get the most from the people that attend the program is like, wow, like I've grown so much. I'm growing so much from coming into contact with these ideas and questioning myself and turning things upside down and things start to open up for people. So I think I love that you say that because that's sort of feedback we get so much. So
That's awesome.
well, I want to just say thanks again for sharing yourself, and we've covered a lot of stuff today. Before we spoke, we were like, yeah, we can't be too ambitious, but I think we've gone to a lot of places, and hopefully all the coaches listening, you're gonna get a lot of value from this too. So thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, and thank you for putting together a thing that reaches out to folks at a big scale, so that we can get ideas out into the world where they need to be.
We are releasing this session as part of the launch of our online Art of Developmental coaching program. It runs from March the 15th to June the 17th of 2017. It's all online, so you can join us from wherever you are in the world. And Jennifer and other pioneering master teachers are going to teach you exactly how to apply this powerful approach to coaching. So registration opens February the 17th this year, 2017. You can head to www.artofdevelopmentalcoaching.com for more info.